Welcome to Man in Progress, Forging Manhood. I'm Travis Murray, values coach and your guide to building a life driven by real values. Each week we explore what it means to be a man today, talk about and to thinkers and doers who've been through it, and give you steps to show up better for yourself and those you love. If you're ready to forge your own path, you're in the right place. Let's get to it. Welcome back to Man in Progress, Forging Manhood. I'm Travis Murray, values coach and your guide on a journey that keeps unfolding. Last week, we kicked off season 2 by getting honest about our values. We didn't just talk about them in the abstract. We found them, named them, and admitted that some of them were positive and some were keeping us small. Today, we take a step into the brain itself. We're going to explore the hidden network that runs our mental life when we're not paying attention and why our values shape how it works. Have you ever been driving somewhere familiar and suddenly realized you don't remember the last few miles? Your hands were on the wheel, your eyes were on the road, but your mind was somewhere else. You were planning dinner, thinking about a conversation, replaying a regret. That mental wandering wasn't random. It was powered by a set of brain regions that scientists call the default mode network. This network activates when we turn inward, when we daydream, when we remember, when we rehearse conversations, when we imagine our future. It's so active that some researchers call it the brain's dark energy because it uses a lot of metabolic power, even when we're not doing anything externally demanding. What's fascinating is that this default network is not idle. It shapes who we are. When we are not focused on a specific task, our brain replays memories, rehearses possible futures, and weighs them against personal values. Neuroscientists have found that when people read stories about values they refuse to trade away, like fairness or loyalty, their default mode network lights up. Values aren't just ideas we trot out on our birthdays. They live in our mental background and quietly steer us toward or away from choices. You might think you're just sipping coffee and scrolling your phone, but your default network is asking, am I the kind of man who shows up? Am I living my courage? Those questions set the compass for your next decision before you realize it. Why this matters for men in progress. In season 1, we forged tools journaling, honesty, responsibility, and courage, and even brotherhood. We learned to name and hold our blade and build a sheath to protect what matters. In episode 1 of this season, we identified our values. We move from what we value to how those values actually work in the brain. Understanding this helps us to stop fighting ourselves. It turns out the story you tell yourself when you're mowing the lawn can be as important as the workout you skipped or the apology you gave. If we ignore the default network, we stay at war with ourselves. If we shape it with intentional values, we make progress without burning out. The brain's default mode network, the DMN, is a set of brain regions that includes the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex, the parietal and temporal lobes. Neuroscientists discovered it accidentally. They were scanning brains while people rested between tasks and realized that certain areas consistently lit up when people weren't focused on an external challenge. The network activates when we recall autobiographical memories, think about ourselves and others, envision the future, or contemplate moral questions. In other words, it's the seat of our internal story. When researchers asked people to read narratives involving protected values, values they would never trade for money or convenience, the participants' default mode network was more active than when they read stories about practical decision making. The same network also responds strongly when people contemplate moral dilemmas or imagine what others are thinking. Why? Because values are not stored like a grocery list. They're woven into our identity. The default mode network ties our memories and our imagined futures together with the thread of what matters to us. Values, stories, and self. This is why values work is personal and sometimes painful. You cannot separate what you value from how you see yourself. If you say you value bravery, but your default story of yourself is, I'm the guy who plays it safe, your brain will feel off balance. Your default network will constantly ask, which version is true? That internal tension drains energy and makes it easy to take the path of least resistance, the one that fits your unexamined story. When I first began this work, I thought I valued freedom to choose my path, freedom from the 9-to-5 grind. What I discovered was that I actually valued comfort. Comfort showed up when I chose the couch over a run, when I chose fast food over cooking, when I chose staying small over risking failure. My default network had encoded comfort first as my guiding principle. I had to rewrite the story by identifying and practicing new values: courage, integrity, humility. That work changed how my mind wandered. My daydreams shifted from fantasies of escaping to visions of showing up. That's the default network in action: dopamine and the cost of cheap reward. Now let's bring in another piece of the puzzle: dopamine. Popular culture has reduced dopamine to a chemical that causes pleasure. Neuroscience paints a more nuanced picture. Dopamine is involved in motivation, learning, and reward. In one study, researchers trained rats to run a maze for chocolate milk. They expected dopamine to spike when the rats got the treat. Instead, they found that dopamine levels slowly ramped up from the moment the rats started running and peaked as they approached the goal. The closer the reward, the stronger the signal. The ramp was steeper when the reward was larger. This suggests that dopamine is not just about immediate pleasure, it's an internal guidance system that helps us persist toward distant goals. Why does this matter? Because our world is full of easy dopamine hits: social media likes, junk food, binge watching, porn, gossip. Each hit signals reward accomplished, even when nothing meaningful has been achieved. Those cheap hits train the brain to expect quick satisfaction. Meanwhile, the default network, which holds our long term values, loses its influence. Delayed gratification becomes harder because the brain has learned to value the immediate ping over the bigger goal. It's like taking a bite of candy every time you think about working out. Eventually, you associate thinking with candy rather than movement. I'm not saying dopamine is bad. We need it to stay motivated. But when we flood our system with quick rewards, we dull its signal. We never let it ramp up over time because we never go long enough without a hit. The result is apathy. That's one reason some people with Parkinson's disease, whose dopamine production is impaired, struggle to stay motivated, to finish long tasks. Their brain cannot generate the slow ramping signal that normally keeps us moving toward distant rewards. We can learn from this by managing our environment and habits. We can design our days to provide meaning rather than constant pings. Linking values and dopamine. Your values can help you ride out the distance to the reward. If you value integrity, you might withhold checking your phone until you finish writing that chapter. If you value growth, you might postpone that extra snack until after the workout. Every time you delay a cheap hit in favor of your long term values, you let your dopamine ramp up. You teach your brain that the big reward is worth waiting for. This isn't about being puritanical. It's about aligning your biology with your values. When I was learning to stand in my own integrity, I would pause before I clicked on the YouTube or grabbed a snack and ask, what am I choosing? Most of the time, I wasn't hungry or curious. I was avoiding discomfort. So I withheld the reward until I made one small step toward my goal: writing 2 sentences, doing 10 push ups, calling a friend. Over time, my default story shifted from "I can't control myself" to "I make choices aligned with my values." I still enjoy dessert and movies. I just don't let them run my life. A 6 step reflection to reshape your default network. Like last episode, I don't want to just leave you with a theory. Let's walk through a reflection practice that will help you observe your default network and align it with your values. Grab a pen, a journal, or your phone. If you're driving, come back to this later. This process is not therapy, by the way. It's a tool for self awareness. Number one, name a moment of pride. Think of a recent moment when you felt proud of how you showed up. Could be a finished project, being patient with your child, telling the truth when it was hard. Notice the feeling in your body. What value was present? Courage, honesty, patience, kindness. Write it down. Name a moment of regret. Think of a recent moment when you felt disappointment in yourself. Maybe you snapped at someone, skipped a workout, or wasted hours on social media. Notice the sensation in your body. Maybe heavy shoulders or a sinking stomach. What value was missing? Integrity, discipline, compassion? Write that down too. Regret isn't about beating yourself up. It's about identifying the gap between your actions and your values. 3, scan your calendar and your bank account. Open your calendar. Look at the last week. Where did your time go? Now open your bank statements. Where did your money go? Time and money reveal values. If your calendar is filled with meetings and errands, but there's no time for rest or relationships, then the value of connection might be missing. If most of your money goes to comfort goods and none goes to learning or giving, maybe comfort is your dominant value. Don't judge, just observe. Number four, ask a friend for a mirror. Reach out to someone you trust and ask them, what values do you see me living? What values do you think I neglect? Listen without defending yourself. Others often see patterns that we miss because our default network protects our self image. Their feedback can help us rewrite our story. Number five, circle reoccurring themes. Look at what you wrote in steps 1 through 4. Do certain values keep showing up? Does comfort, honesty, belonging, control, service, or growth appear again and again? Circle them. Those are likely the values your default network is already reinforcing, whether positive or negative. Number six, choose one value to nurture and one negative value to understand. Pick a positive value that you want to cultivate, like courage or kindness. Pick a negative value or habit you want to understand, like comfort or control. For the next week, every time your mind wanders, gently ask yourself, am I feeding courage or comfort? Am I living kindness or control? When you catch yourself reaching for a cheap reward, pause and ask, which value will this strengthen? Then make a choice. Celebrate when you choose the long game. Forgive yourself when you don't. And repeat. This is how you train your default network. The role of humor and community. You might be tempted to take all this very seriously. After all, we're talking about brain networks and personal values. But remember, humor is part of the forge. Neuroscience might sound heavy, but there's room for a laugh. When you catch yourself scrolling for the 10th time, smile when your default network spins a story about how you're a failure, crack a joke about how dramatic your brain can be. Laughter releases tension and resets your perspective. It's like lifting a weight with a smile instead of grimace. The weight doesn't change, but your relationship to it does. Community matters too. The default network is social. It helps us imagine what others think and feel. When we share our values, journey with friends or mentors, we strengthen that network in healthier ways. We stop believing we're the only ones struggling with distraction or cheap dopamine hits. We discover that other men are also learning to delay gratification, to choose integrity over comfort. Brotherhood doesn't just provide accountability, it rewires our brains to see a different normal, aligning the mental shift with the journey. Think of this episode as the hinge between knowing your values and living them. Last week, we identified our values. Today, we peeked under the hood to see how values and dopamine shape the stories your brain tells when no one is looking. In future episodes, we'll keep building, exploring habit formation, identity, purpose, and relationships, always grounded in this interplay between biology and values. We won't rush. We'll let the dopamine ramp up. We'll let the default network rewrite its script, and we'll keep forging. The work ahead doesn't get easier, but it does get clearer. If this conversation sparks something in you, subscribe or follow on your favorite platform. Share the episode with a friend who might need to hear it. Leave a review so we can reach more men who feel the weight and want to carry it with honor. Most of all, take action. Do the 6-step reflection. Withhold one cheap reward this week and see how it feels when you earn your dopamine honestly. Keep a journal of where your mind goes when it wanders. Notice when your default network drifts toward comfort or courage. Celebrate small wins. Finally, don't forget that I've put together a free PDF with about 200 values and short descriptions. It's a tool to help you name what matters. You can download it at travismurrayvo.com/start-here. There's no catch. Print it, circle your top values, and keep it where you can see it. We'll refer back to it often in this season. Thank you for listening. Keep your eyes on the long road, your hands steady on the wheel, and your heart open to the work. Your brain's default network is waiting to be rewired. Your values are ready to guide it. The next choice you make between the remote and the journal, between comfort and courage, will shape the man you're becoming. Let's keep forging together. Taking the science a little further. We've covered a lot of ground already, but the brain is richer than one network or one chemical. Let's go a little deeper. The default network isn't an island. It is part of a system that includes the salience network and the executive network. The salience network is like a switchboard determining whether your attention should stay inward or pivot to the outside. Research shows it acts as a dynamic switch between the default network and the executive control network. When something truly matters, the salience network rings the bell. That bell is often your values. The executive network helps you plan, decide, and focus. When you need to call your attention back from the wandering thoughts of the default network and into action, the salience network hands you over to the executive network. In moments of crisis, excitement, or urgency, the salience network pushes you toward the network that will serve you best. In everyday life, that means your values are not just philosophical statements, they're neurological signals that help the switchboard know where to send your attention. When you tell yourself that family matters, your brain treats a crying child as a more important than a news headline. That's salience at work, a sentinel inside you. Scientists have debated what the default network is for. Two leading ideas can help us understand why values and stories activate it so strongly. The sentinel hypothesis suggests that when the brain isn't engaged in specific tasks, it remains on guard, continuously monitoring the environment and evaluating the social and emotional significance of things around you. Picture a guard in a tower scanning the horizon, not sleeping. That guard keeps you safe by noticing what matters. A sudden sound from your child's room, an email from a friend, a nagging sense that something is off. If your values are the guard's instructions, then the default network is the guard itself. It checks the world against what you care about. The internal mental activity hypothesis proposes that the default network is involved in self generating thought, daydreaming, planning, memory, and imagination. It is here that we rehearse conversations, revisit our past, and imagine alternate futures. When we reflect on whether we lived in accordance with our values, it is this internal workspace that we use. Values give the internal activity a direction, turning rumination into reflection. Without values, the default network can become a loop of self criticism and distraction. With values, that loop becomes a compass. Why stories light up your values? One of the most striking findings in neuroscience is that stories about core protected values, things you would never compromise, activate the default network more than stories about everyday choices. Researchers at USC read stories to participants that involved cherished values such as honesty, loyalty, or protecting the vulnerable. When people engaged with those stories, their default network activity spiked. Their brains devoted huge amounts of energy to making sense of the narrative and connecting it to their own values. Stories help us organize information and create meaning. That's why the stories you tell yourself about who you are matter. If you believe that you are inherently lazy or selfish, your default network will look for evidence to confirm that story. If you believe that you are capable of growth, empathy, and resilience, the same network will search for proof of those qualities. This finding explains why political debates can be so heated. Protected values are neural. When someone attacks a belief that touches your core values, your default network lights up and you feel attacked at the level of identity. Understanding this can soften how we engage with others. It's not just a disagreement about facts, it's a conflict of values that runs through the autopilot system of the brain. When you see it that way, you can choose to respond with curiosity instead of anger. You can also watch your own reactions and ask, which of my values just got touched? How do I want to respond? More on dopamine and delayed gratification. Let's go back to dopamine for a moment, because we haven't fully unpacked what the research says. We often treat dopamine like a villain, but it is a teacher. One study of monkeys showed that when rewards were delayed, dopamine responses to the conditioned cue declined according to the hyperbolic decay function. The longer the wait, the less the dopamine neuron fired for the cue. However, the dopamine response at the moment of reward itself increased with the delay. In other words, if you train yourself to wait, the actual reward feels more satisfying. This is how our brain encourages patience and persistence. The harder you work, the sweeter the fruit. In another set of experiments, researchers found that the value of reward decreased in a hyperbolic manner with time. A reward delivered in 1 hour might feel half as valuable as the same reward delivered now, and its value drops further as the wait increases. The tendency is known as temporal discounting and is built into our biology. But when you can train it, when you delay a small pleasure, like the urge to check your phone, and instead focus on a task that serves a higher value, you are teaching your dopamine system that it pays to wait. Over time, your brain rewires to associate the bigger long term reward with the bigger dopamine release. That is the neuroscience behind turning down a donut and saving for a marathon medal. Practical exercises for the next 10 minutes. We've talked abstractly about networks and chemicals. Let's get concrete with more practices you can try now. Building on the sixth step that we covered earlier, number one, notice when the sentinel surfaces throughout your day. Pause when you feel a strong emotion and ask yourself, what value just got poked? Maybe you felt irritated when someone cut you off in traffic. Is it because respect matters to you or safety? This turns anger into data. It shows the default network doing its sentinel work. Two, set a timer for daydreaming. Instead of letting mind wandering steal your morning, give yourself a deliberate 10-minute wander in the afternoon. Sit somewhere quiet and let your thoughts flow. When your mind drifts to values or goals, jot them down. This uses the internal mental activity function of the default network purposefully. Number three, play with the salience switch. Give your salience network a clear signal by setting physical cues that align with your values. If health is a value, keep a water bottle on your desk. When the default network starts scrolling, the sight of the water bottle will cue the salience network to shift you to the executive network. Drink water, then get back to work. You're training your brain to treat your own values as salient. Delay one small gratification each day. Pick something routine, checking social media, coffee, sugar, or TV, and delay it by 10 minutes. During the wait, remind yourself you're waiting. I'm practicing my patience muscle. Notice how the craving rises and falls. When you finally enjoy the thing, pay attention to how rewarding it feels. You're calibrating your dopamine system to appreciate effort. Five, rewrite a personal story. Take a moment from your life that made you feel shame or regret and write it down. Then write a second version where you acted on alignment with your values. Reading that new narrative will engage your default network in a constructive way. It's not denial, it's rehearsal for how you want to show up next time. Your brain believes the stories you tell it. Choose stories that are honest and hopeful. Six, bring a friend into the loop. Share one of your values and ask a trusted friend or partner to tell you when they see you living it and when they see you ignoring it. This outside mirror is an extension of your salience network. We're social animals. Other people help us see what we can't. How environment shapes your networks. Don't forget that physical, sleep, exercise, and nutrition affect both your default and executive networks. Chronic stress can make the salience network overly reactive, causing you to flip between networks chaotically. Lack of sleep makes it harder for the executive network to engage. Eating a nutrient dense meal can calm the body and free up cognitive resources. Movement helps balance dopamine. When your body is well cared for, your networks can do their job. Similarly, the environment you inhabit can either support or sabotage your values. Keep your phone in another room when you're working on something meaningful. Place reminders of your values where your eyes can see them. At the dinner table, ask each family member to share one proud moment from the day. You are sculpting not just your own brain, but a shared network of values that extends to your children and friends. The long journey ahead. This episode is a continuation, not a conclusion. We're going to keep unpacking neuroscience, psychology, and philosophy in the future episodes. Later, we'll look at how gratitude reshapes the network, how social media hijacks the salience network, and how movement affects dopamine regulation. We'll also explore more ways to practice values in community and talk with experts who spend their lives studying these networks. For now, give yourself credit. You've taken another step, not just to understand your brain, but to align it with the life you want. And that matters. Remember, at any time, you can download a list of about 200 values from my website at travismurrayvo.com/start-here. No sign up, just a list. Use it at your reference, cut out the ones that speak to you, and ignore the rest. And if today's conversation sparked something, share this episode with someone, leave a review, and tell us which values you're working on. Your voice might be the salience cue someone else needs. Your mind isn't just a processor, it's a networked organ shaped by what you pay attention to. Your values are the manual for that organ. Train your brain, live your values, and always remember you are not late, you are not behind, you are a man in progress. Keep forging.